Good morning.
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 The blessing of the Lord be upon you.
Bless you in the name of the Lord.
Thank you. Minor Prophets. Lesson number 52. And you know what that means, right? We've been
At least a year.
like a year. Well, we've been over a year, but it's been 52. That's a year's worth of lessons. And today we start with the book of Job. So I would venture to say, based on chapters, I think we are probably, we are probably either halfway or a little more than halfway through the minor prophets, because the bigger books we've already looked at, and Joel only has 3 chapters. So some of the ones that are left, some of them only have 1 chapter, so we'll only spend like a couple weeks on them. And so next year at this time, maybe we'll be into a different study, but I've enjoyed it. I hope you have also. That's been enlightening for you. So, the book of Joel, looking at the historical context. We always try to date these because if we don't put it in a historical context, it has to be written for some reason. It's just not thrown out there and say, well, whatever guess you make is good. There's a reason for it. There's a purpose for it. And that's going to be the same with Joel. But he does not date his prophecy according to the ruling kings. Most of the others, in the time of Jotham and Ahaz and Hezekiah and such. And it'll pinpoint, you'd be able to pinpoint where his prophecies are occurring. Joel doesn't do that. So what we have to do, we have to go to the internal evidence. What is the book pointing to? Well, with the book of Joel, it's kind of like, it could be anywhere from the 800 BC down to the time after the exile. And some scholars will put it at just about any place. The studies that I've done, I believe that it's in the time that we're looking at right after the book of Hosea. So you have what we go through. We started first with Jonah, and then we went to Amos and Hosea, and now we come to Joel. And I think it's correct. Here are some of the reasons why and what's going on. The setting is an invasion of Judah. And that invasion consists of locusts, a locust plague. 4 types of locusts that are going to come against Judah. Some of them, let's go down here, starting with chapter 1, verse 4. What the cutting locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust left, the hopping locust has eaten. And what the hopping locust left, the destroying locust has eaten. But it's just a wave after a wave after a wave of these locusts. And if it's literally locusts that are coming in and destroying, you should have a historical account of that. I don't know that anyone's ever provided a historical account of that. But we do have a historical account of invading Judah near the time of the destruction of the northern kingdom by some of the nations that are mentioned here. So look at verse 6. The setting again is an invasion. For a nation has come up against my land, powerful and beyond number. Its teeth are lion's teeth, and it has the fangs of a lioness. So it's a powerful nation. And I think most scholars would ascribe that to Assyria. Now some will say, well, that's Babylon. That's later on at the destruction of Jerusalem. But I think later on we're going to find out that Jerusalem survives at the time of Hezekiah. So it's going to push it back to this time, even just right before the destruction of the northern kingdom, but warning the southern kingdom, hey, this is coming, so you better be prepared for it. The nations mentioned are Tyre and Sidon and Philistia. Tyre and Sidon are together. So that's why the comma's in there. Tyre and Sidon kind of go together. You have Philistia, but you remember from our study in Hosea, I believe Phoenicia is mentioned, and Edom, right? So you have all these different smaller nations around there that were in the coalition. The northern kingdom, Tyre and Sidon, Phoenicia, Philistia, Edom, they wanted Judah to go with them to fight against Assyria. And the king of Judah says, no, we're not getting involved. That's not our fight. Right? So they start attacking Judah, which that gives you an idea. Hey, here's the perfect setting for this book, what's being talked about. But instead of the king trusting in the Lord, he goes to Assyria and says, help us. Help us. Because they wanted to fight against Assyria, he goes to Assyria. And that's when Judah became a vassal state of Assyria. So those nations are mentioned in Joel chapter 3 and verse 4. These nations had captured Judeans and sold them into slavery to the Ioan Greeks. Joel chapter 3 and verse 6. Okay? The Ionian Greeks, or Ionian Greeks, study art in college, and one of the first things they talk about in art is the Ionian Greeks and how they made their statues and how they made their temples and the columns and the capitals and stuff of their temples, their buildings and such. And this was over, I believe, in the southern part of Greece. And they would take these Judeans as they attacked around Jerusalem in particular, but they'd capture some people from Jerusalem, and they'd take them over to the coast, and they would sell them as slaves to the Greeks. But also it mentions that they looted or took tribute from the temple. Well, that's more Assyria than these nations, but it's possible that the king also tried to pay off some of these other nations to keep them from attacking and destroying more, and especially when it comes to sparing Jerusalem. So that kind of lends us to that period of time right around when Hosea also was preaching and talking about the destruction of the northern kingdom, but also warnings to the southern kingdom. Now there are similarities to other 8th century prophetic utterances. And I'm sorry, we also talked about Micah, didn't we? We just finished with Micah. Similarities to other 8th century prophetic utterances. So, and this is one of the things when scholars date the books of the Bible, they look at things. Where are the similarities? You know about the Apocrypha, right? There are certain books that are in, say, the Catholic Bible, especially the Old Testament, that aren't in the Protestant Bibles. And people say, oh, and every now and then, oh, the lost books of the Bible, you know. Well, they're not lost books. Scholars looked at them and said they don't really belong in the Bible. They're not really Holy Spirit inspired. Like the book of Enoch, it was written, but it wasn't written at the time of Enoch. It was written years later. How do you know it was written years later? Well, because you look at the words that are being used, you look at how sentences are put together, themes that are there, and you can see this isn't what was talked about. You go back and look at the literature of the times, especially in the New Testament. Some of the books like the Gospel of Peter and all these that they come up with and say, you know, well, somebody writes a book, say, 200 years after the birth of Christ, and puts the name of an apostle on it. And people say, oh, that must be a book that Peter wrote then. No, because it's purely written in language that reflects things going on 200 years after the birth of Christ, not things that were going on at the time of Christ's journey here upon the earth. I hope that makes sense. That's why those books are not in there. You can tell they're not that time period, plus they're not Holy Spirit inspired. So when we look at these and we compare, are there similarities to writings that we know are of that time? And these are the ones that have comparisons in the book of Joel. Like Joel chapter 3, verse 10. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. Now, that's a little different than we have in some places. Look at Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 4. He shall judge between the nations and shall decide disputes for many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Isn't that the opposite of what Joel said? But what? The language is similar. And when did Isaiah prophesy? Well, you go back and you look at the beginning of the book of Isaiah. Let's just go back to chapter 1. Verse 1. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So if the language is similar, there you have similar times. But not only that, Micah chapter 4 and verse 3, he shall judge between many peoples and shall decide disputes for strong nations far away, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Well, that's the same as Isaiah, isn't it? So we go back to Joel. Chapter 3 and verse 10. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. So what? The language is similar, but it's opposite. Why would Joel be saying the opposite of what Micah and Isaiah are saying?
Different regions.
More war between people, increased war.
Okay, so what's happening? They're being attacked, right? What do they need to do?
They need to create weapons.
They need to prepare for war. But what happens when Hezekiah repents? The Lord's going to take care of the problem. Now what do we need to do? Prepare for the future. Beat your swords into plowshares. Things are going to be better. But the key is the language is the same. All right?
A plowshare is basically like, I'm picturing plowshare would be like what you see with animals, and it's a one row plow with the handles. That's kind of a plowshare.
Yeah. And it may be just the stem of it there that goes down.
But
You know, beat that down straight. They would know what to do with it. All right, verse 16. The Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth quake. But the Lord is a refuge to his people, a stronghold to the people of Israel. But now, who are the people of Israel? Is it everybody in the nation, including Judah? Or is it the people who hear his voice and obey his voice? That's who it is. That's who he's going to take care of. So, let me see here. Amos chapter 1 and verse 2. And the Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem. The pastures of the shepherds mourn, and the top of Carmel withers or melts. The Lord is so powerful. But you have that common language there. Let's see, is it somewhere else? Jeremiah 25:30. The Lord will roar from on high, and from his holy habitation utter his voice. He will roar mightily against his foe. Look at that, against his foe. Who was his foe? Did you find it?
No.
Jeremiah 25,
Okay.
30 and 31.
Okay.
So he will roar mightily against his fold. Who's that? Who's his fold? His sheep. Who's his sheep? Well, it's supposed to be, well, remember Jeremiah is 100 years or so later, and down at the time when Babylon is, the Babylonians are coming to destroy Jerusalem. Now he's definitely mad at Judah and Jerusalem because of what they're doing. But again, there's the language, but we know when Jeremiah prophesies, so that takes it a little out. But there, the language, back to that time period that we're talking about. Joel 3:19. Egypt shall become a desolation, wilderness, for the violence done to the people of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. Okay. let me look here, because we've got Isaiah 19, 1 through 17. That's a long, just look at the very beginning of that. An oracle concerning Egypt. So Isaiah, the major prophet, is speaking the same thing about that same time. And later on, I don't think at the time of the Babylonian conquest and destruction of Jerusalem that Egypt is a problem. Now, why would I say that Egypt's not a problem? Because at that time, remember, there's kind of a division. They're trying to get Egypt to help them. But Egypt won't help, can't help, because they're too weak. And there are two main prophets then, and that's Jeremiah and Ezekiel. And Ezekiel is taken to Babylon in captivity. Jeremiah is taken by another group where? To Egypt. So this prophecy wouldn't be for Babylon, would it? Or for the time of the Babylonian captivity. Perhaps earlier, but not for the time, not for later. You see how I'm kind of melting this down? And chapter 34 and verse 5 of Isaiah, for my sword has drunk its fill in the heavens. Behold, it descends for judgment upon Edom, upon the people I have devoted to destruction. So there again, there's Edom. He's devoted them for destruction. Why? Because they've come in and when people were trying to, now this would actually apply also to the time of the Babylonians captivity. They stopped people from escaping from Jerusalem. But even at this time, this earlier time, they're coming in and trying to take captives and sell them as slaves, maybe not to the Ionian Greeks, but down to the people of Arabia. All right? Now what do we have? Okay. A. Here. Early in the reign of Ahaz, the Philistines invaded Judah's Shephelah. And that's in 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 18. And remember what the Shephelah is? Okay. If we had the map of Israel up here, make sure I get this on, you'd have the mountain range running down kind of the middle where Jerusalem and Samaria, that's in the middle. And over here you have the Mediterranean coast. But between the coast and the mountains, you have this wide plain. It's where they grew all their wheat. The Shephelah. And the Philistines lived over on the coast too, so they were attacking up through the Shephelah. And again, 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 18. Before Hezekiah's restoration of Gaza and the Negeb in 727 BC, this was happening. And that's according to 2 Kings chapter 18 and verse 8. So you have all this information. The Philistines say, when are they doing this? When are they attacking? When are they taking slaves? All of the historical data surrounding this points to or toward a date of about 730 for Joel. And I say 730 because it's prophecy, it's predicting a time, and 721 would be the destruction of the northern kingdom at the hands of the Sumerians, at the hands of the Assyrians. Okay? Then the Assyrians, Judah's being attacked from all these sides by this coalition, right? The Assyrians are supposed to be protecting Judah. Judah's paying tribute to them. The Assyrians take the northern kingdom, then they don't protect Judah. We're going to take it too. And they come down and just wipe out everything that's left, like the destroying locust, and down to Jerusalem. But, if memory serves me right, about 705 BC is when Sennacherib's army is destroyed outside of Jerusalem. And we'll talk about that later. But that's because of Hezekiah's repentance. And that is a major feature of the book of Isaiah. So that's why I put it in that time frame. Hezekiah hasn't come to reign yet, but he will shortly. And he'll save the nation. He'll save Jerusalem. God will spare them, but as king, it's credited to him. From 726 to 697. Okay, so we see where we are there. And next week, we'll just start with the exposition of the text. How would that be? All right. So we got the time frame. We know pretty much what's going on, and I think you will really like the book of Joel. I know I do, because there is, after you get past the locusts and start into the day of the Lord, you got a lot of prophecy of the Messianic reign. All right. Thank you for your time and attention, class.